There have been many editions of Dungeons & Dragons and sub-editions of those editions, and each of these design teams is working on trying to capture what they think is the fun of the game for their particular era without alienating other audiences too much. And sometimes that annoys people that want a finely tuned game. They want something that is made to order. They want to go to a restaurant and order exactly the meal that they want, not have to kind of cook it themselves in a kitchen with raw ingredients and spices. And behind it is a company that is trying to sell a product. And if I were the kind of person to give a company the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not, I would say that these things are expensive to make. And while TTRPGs are a more popular hobby than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago, they are still a niche hobby when compared with something like a video game. And it is not viable for a single company to make 3, 4, 5 different versions of a TTRPG, all with slight variations on some rules, but mostly all the same. If I were more cynical, and I am, I would say that they want to make one game to rule them all, one game to bind them, new and old audiences alike. Don't worry, you can play your gritty dungeon crawl and care about torches and encumbrance, and you can play your superhero fantasy where you're facing off against world-destroying planar disasters, and you can absolutely play your melodramatic Elizabethan London kind of game. One game, everybody please proceed to checkout. And that is grit in the gears for anybody that wants to buy off-shelf a game that is tailor-made to the kind of fantasy that they want to play, and is also what makes Dungeons & Dragons so successful as a game entry point into the hobby. Because it is a game, it is that, but it is also a game engine to create many types of games, like Unreal Engine is. Players don't directly manipulate game engines. For that, they have a user interface. And in TTRPGs, that is the character sheet. It is the player's window into how to run their character in the game world. Any game world. It supports your style of play, my style of play, their style of play. And we, watching out for the mic here, do not all play together. We are all playing in separate groups, and it is easy for one group to look at a character sheet, see something that they don't use at all, and wonder, why is that still here? Wouldn't this game just be easier, simpler if they just got rid of it? Hi, I'm James, and on this channel I talk about things that I think about, plan and plot for my tabletop role-playing games. If you like that kind of content, then there's buttons down there for like and subscribe. Today I'm thinking about granular versus simplified game design, or why I want both stats and modifiers. Before someone goes off in the comments, you just don't like change. I am fine with change, so long as I know that I'm getting change and you're not trying to slip something totally different underneath the name. If I get Elden Ring and Elden Ring Night Ring, 2 games that I can go buy today, I know that I'm getting something different. Same thing with Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy Tactics. Great, love that. Let's do that. But with an addition, that doesn't feel quite the same to me. It feels more like a book. If I buy the 2nd or 3rd printing of Lord of the Rings, I expect that I'm getting the Lord of the Rings book. And I'm aware that Tolkien changed The Hobbit after the release of Lord of the Rings so that the 2 books would match up. And had I read the original Hobbit, then read Lord of the Rings and realized he changed things, that would be weird to me. It's not because I never read those original editions. My copies of it back there, it's like 4th or 6th or something printing, whatever it is. It's a very later printing, so I never had that original experience. But I have read Homer's The Odyssey. And if I picked up a new translation of The Odyssey, I would kind of expect that it would be faithful to Homer's original The Odyssey if you're going to say Homer's The Odyssey. But I don't mind if you take a new version of it, if you reimagine it, like Epic the Musical by Jorge Rivera Herranz. Hopefully I got that somewhat close, because I really like it. Because I know that it is based on the Odyssey. It is not a truthful reproduction, and that kind of matters in this context. I don't even mind if you're just changing the game to try to remove some of the friction in people understanding what the game is trying to do, like with the removal of THAC0 after 2nd edition. I play with THAC0 in the 2nd edition. It's 2-hit armor class 0, in case no one's ever told you what that stands for, because it stands for something. And I could have played with it for the rest of my life, and personally, I would have been fine. I did not find the math to be a problem. But for a lot of people, adding is much easier than subtracting. And we get the same number difference, just different way of looking at it. We remove some of the friction. And there are some people that are like, you're just making games too easy. You're making games for babies and whatever with that. I want more people to play this game. And if I can remove some of the friction while keeping the complexity, then I am all for that. Change is not good or bad. It's something else entirely. And there are a bunch of people, friends of mine, that are playing games like Daggerheart and Draw Steel and see that those games have removed the ability score, the stat, and kept just the modifier. They're now the same thing. Why can't we just do that? What is the advantage, the reason to have the stat and the modifier? Stats and modifiers are two interrelated numbers. We can consider the stat your absolute value. Your character has an 18 intelligence. They are that smart. They have that potential. And any time I needed to reference a situation that was completely within the character's control, I would use the stat. Your character tries to jump over things without any pressure. They want to lift a gate and there's no reason they can't take their time. I would absolutely reference back to your strength, your dexterity. You can either know this or you don't. But there are other situations in which there's some other variables. So we can consider the modifier a variable. And the stat is going to give you a chance to modify things that are not wholly within your character's control. Your character might find a secret clue among all the arcane tomes that they're investigating. But while they're doing that, the fighter's over there tinkering with some enchanted armor while they try to perceive something when you told them to leave that armor alone. They're making a lot of noise here. Those other variables in a scene have to be accounted for somehow. Your intelligence, your skill investigation are two things that are considered. And then there's also the noise your other party members are making, the stress of being in a dungeon, the low light conditions, the conditions of these tomes, all accounted for in the difficulty class. And the argument for getting rid of the stat does have some merit. We could simplify things and say the 4 is both your absolute number and your variable. And in 5th edition, rules as written, the modifier is doing most of the heavy lifting. So if my only concern was people who played 5th edition, exactly rules as written, and I was tasked with writing 5th edition, 3rd edition, 5.75, this time we mean it, then I might say, let's just get rid of the stat and let's just keep the modifier. But I would be excluding everyone else who likes and has a use for two separate numbers. I view everything that a player writes down on the character sheet as potentially something that could be changed during the game. There are absolutely some things that I would make sure the player knows that this is what's going to happen if they do it before I go ahead and change them. For example, your character's eye color is not something that players would normally expect to change. But if we're playing the Cosmere world, me and my friends have read the Stormlight Archive, love Brandon Sanderson. We all know that if you pick up a shard blade, your eyes are turning blue. So if a character picks up one, I'm absolutely changing their eye color. Another one might be that your level 7 cleric has a crisis of faith, and then they make a pact with a demon, a devil, an angel, a fae being, something else. And then I would say they are no longer a cleric because that's gods, and these other things are something different. So your character is now a warlock. Or you need to go find a new god that you do agree with because there is a difference in the game that we're playing. There are other things that we change quite often, hit points being the thing that changes the most. And they're pretty granular. At the higher levels, medium-high levels, you get such high pools of hit points that you can deliver small hits, medium hits, big hits, annoying hits, and lethal hits. Lots of different kinds of hits that make the dangers feel different to the players. Another thing that changes a lot is exhaustion. And a third used to be the stats. There are very few things that impact them. Shadows to the top of my mind, those do still impact your stats. And I want to run more of those older style things in my 5th edition games, poisons, diseases, and undead. And when I am running those effects, I don't want that impact to just be splat. So I need to be able to fine-tune the amount of impact of either negatives or positives. For example, if you put in a poison and you want to replicate the idea that it numbs your limbs, currently we don't have it do dex damage, because in 5.5 apparently, you would have to track stat changes, save changes, attack changes, damage changes, skills, a bunch of different changes. And on paper, it is easier to do if you just change one thing. But most people aren't on paper character sheets anymore. Over my objection, and with a digital character sheet like Demiplane or D&D Beyond, it would be much easier for those apps to just handle the math and do all the changes, and it is harder to reintroduce a removed mechanic into those apps than it is to just ignore one that's present that you don't want to use. I like 5th edition, but it is not my favorite edition. These two are. And despite the logo that's on the cover, they are as different from 5th edition as they are from 1st edition. And if I want to invite someone over to play the game, they can't just go buy these at the friendly local game store. I can't either. They're falling apart. Like this one's not holding, this one's not holding. Character generator's still in there. I don't even know if I've got a CD player that can run that. So I need to be able to take the stuff that I love from these older games and port it over into the newer games. I want my rogues to be able to hunt down strange venoms from these creatures that they're slaying and exotic alchemical recipes and mix their own poisons. And if all of that boils down to you get a slightly more difficult constitution save and it will inflict 2 more damage plus a condition, then I've kind of lost a meaningful storytelling treasure lever. And I could do some of that with the modifier alone, but the space compresses from 18 possible digits, 1 to 18, down to 8 possible digits, -4 being dead to +4 being a character with 18 of a stat. And if that's not a big deal, you don't understand why you'd want more digits, then why don't you use hit dice instead of hit points? You could just say you're a level 7 character, you get 7 hit dice, plus your constitution modifier, and that's the number of hits that your character can take. Basically makes them heart containers. And a small monster like a goblin or a skeleton will do 1 heart container of damage, and a boss monster will do 3 or 4 heart containers of damage. Some games actually do that. Other games do not. Why not? Because of granularity. And for that, we need to talk about threat design. Let's say that your party has pissed off Despotter, so he's going to send a hit squad after you to knock you out and bring you back to Dis for questioning and probably torture. So the assassins coat their blades with this poison that is supposed to knock you out. When my assassins stab you, they're going to do some hit point damage. That is a very granular pool, and your character is just as effective at 1 hit point as they were at 100 hit points. I know some people hate that, it doesn't feel realistic to them. I happen to like it because it does mean I can make the players feel like unstoppable juggernauts just stomping all over my monsters. But like with this hit squad, that is probably not the feeling that I'm going after. I could use something like exhaustion, but that's not very granular at all. Each hit is going to move you much closer to death very quickly and much further away from victory very quickly. It's what's called death spiral. It is rare that I want to use something like that, but it is a useful design space if I want players to really think hard about the consequences of doing things or make sure that they've got the proper preparations, like going out into a blizzard. If I attack dexterity directly to represent that creeping numbness over your muscles, I get this double-digit workspace, 8 to 18, which is more than exhaustion, but less than like 100 for hit points. And if I was just doing the modifier, it would be a short path to death. A lot like exhaustion. I already have a short runway in the game. I don't want to get rid of that, but that's not the only thing I need. I want a middle ground between the death spiral of exhaustion and the attrition of hit points. And players feel those kind of threats differently. When the shadows start draining the fighter before the big fight with Vecna, all of a sudden the party stops hoarding spells. I don't care about the Cone of Cold. Drop it now, or else Celsi is going to be useless once we get to Vecna. And it's not all about punishment. I can give out manuals of stats, pools of awakening, divine blessings as quest rewards. I can granularly reward stat increases so that the threats stay threatening. But D&D doesn't do that anymore. I know. I play the game, but so long as it is there on the character sheet, we at home have a lever that we can choose to use or not use as we see fit. You and my table are playing the same game, and we're kind of not. Games like Dungeons & Dragons allow us to get in there and muck with the game engine if we choose to do so or not. And if the statistic, the raw stat, the absolute stat, stays on the character sheet and you don't like it, it is much easier for you to ignore it, especially in a digital world, than it is for me to put it back in. I don't think one approach, using the stats and the modifiers, or just using the modifiers, is better or worse than the other one. I think we want different experiences at the table, and some of us want a more granular approach, and some of us want a more simplified approach. That's all there is to that. And yeah, I could play a different game, but this is not a Dungeons and Dragons only problem. Pathfinder 2e is as different from Pathfinder 1e as Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is from Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. Every game mechanic that you offer in the game may be some that someone somewhere is using to make the game experience they want. And I get that you're going to have to cut some possible game mechanics out of these games. Otherwise, these role-playing books are going to become even more intimidating and unwieldy. But if you can leave in a game mechanic and all it does is ask of you that you ignore it if you don't want to use it, and you can include a whole group of other players that have use of it, isn't it worth giving them a home in your game? The ship sailed a long time ago for Dungeons & Dragons being a single unified game and genre. It's been at least 5 different editions, and depending on the box and the books that you buy, it's kind of lots of different kind of games all bundled under this one logo. And would it be nice for there to be one book for your gritty dungeon crawling kind of game with all the rules that you need in there, and another one for your superhero action adventure game over there, and you can pick which one you want to play? Yes. They're called Shadow Dark and Draw Steel, or any other number of games that are out there that do those kind of things. And no, because if you and I get together and decide that we want to play a role-playing game tonight, we could spend that time with you teaching me how to play Mouse Ritter, or I could teach you how to play Shadowrun. But that's going to take some of the time that we have to play. It's the limited time that we have together to play a game better spent learning a new system or playing one that we both know. Chances are, if you're watching this channel, that you probably are really into TTRPGs, and we could probably play as we go. But that is not everyone, and everybody's time is precious. Maybe it is better spent learning a new game because they're intending to do this for a long term. Maybe it is better spent just kind of adapting this game to flavor so that we don't have as much onboarding time. It doesn't bother me that a company behaves like a company, that they're going to try to maximize the amount of people that will buy their one game so they don't have to make multiple versions of this. What bothers me more is people, perhaps unintentionally, trying to exclude entire other groups to make it easy for themselves because of the effort that it takes to ignore something that is written on a sheet. Maybe there is some nostalgia for a game that no longer exists. I call that a preference. I prefer not to use the encumbrance rules. It didn't bother me when it was on the sheet. I just ignored it and didn't use those sections. The kitchen may not be your favorite room in the house, but you don't throw out the stove just because you don't want to cook. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember you're a player too. Try to have some fun.